On June 12, 2021, the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Rockville Human Rights Commission held a panel discussion called Coming Out to Your Community. The panel was made up of support groups, activists, parent groups, and youth groups that all support the LGBTQ youth community. This was a thoughtful, passionate, and educational conversation that the City of Rockville is grateful to share. This panel discussion is also a part of the city's ongoing efforts to ensure that Rockville is an inclusive city, and no matter how you identify, you are a part of a community that cares.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Rockville Human Rights Commission's Rockville Pride panel discussion. I am Gabrielle Zui. I use they, them pronouns, and I will be your moderator and participant for the first half hour. We'll be talking about coming out to different communities. Joining me today is Ellen Olmsted, Professor of English and of Women's and Gender Studies at Montgomery College, Tacoma Park, and Matthew Taylor, Intern Minister of Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Rockville. Could each of you please briefly introduce yourself to the group?
I'm Ellen, and I use she, her, hers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew, and I use they and he pronouns. I am a fifth-year seminarian, and I am with the UU Congregation of Rockville as one of their intern ministers. Thank you.
I am a human rights commissioner for the city of Rockville on my second term. I'm also a human rights major at Columbia University online so far. And I identify as a part of the LGBTQ community. And I'm also autistic and have many other identifiers that I think overlap with my place in the LGBTQ community. So let's get started with the content. Coming out is a unique experience for each person. Coming out, for those who don't know, means sharing your sexual orientation and or your gender identity with someone else, maybe one person, maybe a whole bunch of people. It can be incredibly affirming if things go well, and it can be very hurtful if things do not go well. Coming out is an ongoing and evolving process for many people, since throughout the world, a lot of people see heterosexuality and being cisgender as the default. So in each new space where you present yourself or present your relationships authentically, whether that's school, work, or your religious community, your family, or even more, there can be a new coming out process for you to face each time. So I guess I'll start by sharing my coming out story, and then each of our panelists will share a little bit of theirs. So my first crush was on a girl when I was in 4th grade. And I knew that being gay was a thing, and that it probably wasn't a bad thing per se, but I only really heard about or saw gay men, so I wasn't entirely sure if it worked with girls too. When I was 12, I came out as gay to just my 2 best friends. And then a few months later, I learned that being bi is a thing that exists and that felt right for me. So bi is the identifier that I've mostly used ever since that point. I guess at around 13, coming out to my parents and to everyone else in my life wasn't planned. It wasn't really a choice that I made at the time. So after my best friend and I had come out to each other, her parents, who at the time were very homophobic, they threatened to send her to conversion therapy if she ever decided to be gay. This moment, which I was therefore actually ignited my passion for activism in helping other LGBTQ youth, and was really when I began my involvement in online activism spaces, specifically advocating for bans on conversion therapy in different states. But that was also a really scary moment for me and my friend. And I kind of started to get these anxiety attacks about, oh my gosh, am I going to be the reason that my friend is found out by her parents? Am I going to be the reason that she gets sent to conversion therapy? And thankfully, after several years, none of that ended up happening. And you know, she's in a good place with her parents now, many years later. But I really just, ended up coming out to first my mom, because she was seeing me have all of this anxiety and these panic attacks, and she just needed to know what was going on. And so, I didn't get to do it exactly as I saw these little rainbow cakes on Tumblr and Twitter and whatnot. But I think for me at the time, it was really important that I shared that part of myself, because the fact that I was hiding it, and that I was a part of my friend hiding it too, was detrimental to my mental health. And yeah, at the time, for my parents, it was really just about keeping me safe, keeping me healthy. And I think over the years, it grew more into them really accepting my identity, not just because of, my immediate anxiety concerns, but just as me being me. And then it wasn't until around a year ago that I began using they, them pronouns. And here I am. So that is basically most of my story. I guess whoever would like to go next.
I'll go ahead. I'm the senior queer here, I guess. I came out several decades ago. I have had lots of different experiences, and I'm going to go very quickly through a few in the hope that if people are joining us, then I may have something to offer if you have a comment or a question later. So I will say that briefly, from my upbringing, my parents were very intentional in having us this is the 60s and early 70s, live in truly diverse communities. When I look back at my pictures of my childhood, the neighbors and friends that were so much a part of it, it looks much more diverse than the way I see many neighborhoods and many classrooms today. I split my childhood between Lagos, Nigeria, Detroit, New York, and Boston, Cambridge. And I was very disappointed when I did come out that my father had left, but my mother reacted very terribly. This did not happen until after college. And I think that I never heard my parents use any derogatory language about any group of people. And when I did come out to my mother, it's not that she used any inappropriate language, but because I grew up in a progressive and very politically active household where we were like just put in places to be open to anyone, I was very disappointed with my mother's reaction, completely unprepared for it. I did have a sense that I was different growing up and in college as well, and perhaps had crushes, but because I had so little exposure to gay people, I wasn't able to sort of put together, like, what do I do with that? And also, while I didn't hear people say negative things about being gay, I had no role models, which is why it matters so much to me now to make sure that I speak directly with students and, affirm their process of recognizing where they're at and how they live their lives, and particularly how they deal with, their family systems or different cultures that sometimes are even more resistant or critical of people who are queer. When I was 21, I had finished college. I just happened to be in the right place with the right people at the right time. And a woman initiated a relationship with me. But even at that point, while I loved her a lot, I still wasn't ready to say, oh, I'm queer. But it was in my second relationship with a woman, and I was like, okay, there's a pattern emerging here, so I'm out. And it was a process of coming out to some of my friends, most of whom were fantastic and invited me and whoever I was involved with at the time to their weddings. And certainly for people with whom I worked, that was not an issue. And yet this was a time where there was widespread discrimination for employment and housing. like across the board. I was very blessed at that time. I was in Western Massachusetts. Ultimately, I ended up teaching at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and that is sort of the Happy Valley. And Northampton, which is nearby, has been considered a kind of lesbian oasis. So it was an opportunity to really kind of immerse myself. And the only time that I had really been in any gay community before as a childhood, we sometimes went to Provincetown, Massachusetts. And again, I never heard my parents say anything negative. As a kid, my brother and I are just like, these people are wild and they're having so much fun. So I certainly got caught up in that once I came out, and appreciated any spaces for gay and lesbian people. I've been very fortunate in my workplaces. I decided when I was interviewing for the jobs that I've had the longest as an educator that I would come out in the beginning and ask questions, for example, about whether the school supported domestic partnerships in terms of my partner receiving benefits. And also, I wasn't quite sure. I'd had lots of experiences with kids, but if I were to have a family, would I be entitled to family leave? Those are very important issues. And what protections I would have from my employer, um, because I would be out. And I won't go into that right now, but there are lots of facets to that. I also participated in the UMass Amherst Graduate School of Education's training for trainers. And it was a time when people were just beginning to do a lot of anti-racism, anti-heterosexism, anti-Semitism work. And although it was a few years before Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectional, my experience growing up and then my experience in that training and the work I was trying to do as an activist within that community was very much intersectional. I would say that most of my career, I've been involved with groups like Radical Teacher Collective, Teaching for Change, which is a national network, and Rethinking Schools. And their focus has all been on critical anti-racist teaching. But to move on beyond that, I grew up in the church. My brother is in fact a minister in the United Church of Christ, which is congregational. And it was a very progressive congregation and also integrated more so than many religious places seem to be now. I didn't really believe a lot of the stuff like about the Virgin Mary or the idea of sin or hell, but I did like a lot of other aspects of church. But as an adult at 30, I converted to Judaism. I found that the more I learned about Judaism and what I learned from Jews that I was close to was that some of the ideas were closer to my worldview. And I would say that my experience growing up, as a Protestant, it was not, there was not homophobia in the church. It was very celebratory and very affirming, and people were involved in so many different political protests as a community. And with my brother's a minister in Massachusetts. Were the first state to have civil unions, and he could do whatever he wants in his church. His denomination is very progressive. And I think the two things go together for religions, to say something about my conversion to Judaism. Religions which have allowed women to be more involved in leadership positions are the ones that are more open to embracing LGBTQ people. So for that, it was no surprise then, a very dear friend of mine from college who realized he was gay, was a devout Catholic, he never acted on that. And he's just continued to remain single and celibate through his adult life. But converting to Judaism, I converted with a rabbi in the conservative movement. And conservative doesn't mean politically, it just means that we do all the prayers in Hebrew. We can read the Torah, in the biblical Hebrew, etc. And I'm somewhat more observant. And the big questions that I used to have with the rabbi as I was studying were about sex, money, and food, which are the big things, I think, for almost everybody in life. And the question for me to him was, because I was out to him at the time, I was in a relationship with a woman who happened to be Jewish, but she's not the reason I was converting. And my big question to him was like, what do I do with this? Because there isn't anything that says it's okay in the Old Testament. And then there are lines that people, in some ways erroneously, have interpreted or selectively interpreted to say that it's not okay. Although most of it is about men, it's not about women. And the conversation there was fantastic because the rabbi talked a lot about, how things have changed over time. We don't sort of have a focus of a relationship or marriage is primarily for procreation. It's about love and companionship. And there are plenty of heterosexual Jewish couples who either don't want to have children or can't have them. And there's not something wrong with them within the eyes of God. And that we all have ideals we live up to where we want to be closer and closer to what is the best way to be in our world, but we don't all meet them. And so I could say more about that, but it was important for me to be honest, to not be sort of hiding, and to be able to really be embraced by a community. So I've joined different synagogues that were not specifically for gay and lesbian people that have been incredibly welcoming and very excited, because some synagogues really need some more lifeblood. Not as many people are observant and go to services these days. But I've also been involved when I lived in New York and here in DC in a gay and lesbian synagogue. And that's been really cool. The other thing to say is that I adopted children. And as a single person, I was in a relationship with a woman. We were going to adopt kids. It ended. And I ended up taking care of a daughter that she adopted for several years until she married another woman, because she was a nurse midwife and she was on call. And that was great. That girl is like, I'm like her mother aunt, but I also ended up adopting 3 boys who are not biologically related. And I was at that time in Providence, Rhode Island. And I knew, first of all, that I had to be out, not like as a political statement, but kids will out you. Like, unless you're telling them, shh, it's a secret, or you don't tell them anything, first of all, they figure that stuff out. And second, they're little kids and they're excited, so it's like you're in line at a movie and they're screaming out, this is like gay pride. You can't sort of, shut that down. And having come from a family where there were other kinds of secrets, I never wanted to have any secrets or put my kids in that position. And I also didn't want to give them the idea that there was something wrong or bad about my being gay. And they were surrounded by people who were straight and gay, who from many different backgrounds. So that was important for them. But I was in a group of single people, all of whom were out. I was the only lesbian, the others were gay men. And this was the first group in Rhode Island. And after we each adopted our first child, we all ended up with sons. We used to get together, and that was just a lot of fun, hysterical. I moved, so I lost that sort of support group. But I would say that my sons are grown. They're in their late 20s now. They are African American and Puerto Rican. And I kind of raised them the way my parents raised me, where we were just out there all over, out in the world, and lots of people were a part of our family. And they were just comfortable with sort of introducing me, or if I had a partner over, to just leave it, introduce us to their friends by our names. And then I would hear them occasionally saying to friends who were using like faggot or whatever, the way young kids do, they'd be like, shh, we don't use that language here. And it's in the same vein as I would never have allowed somebody to come in and be using derogatory language about any people of color or people who were disabled or anything else like that. And I think the last thing I want to bring up, so we've got my conversion, we've got my adoption, is that I'm old enough to have been in quite a few relationships of various lengths, and I've been involved with women who had never been involved with women before, who had been married to men before, women who had only been involved with women, and some of them got married to men. That experience sort of just kind of it gave me this sense that there's a fluidity, and really kind of opened me up to sort of just kind of recognizing that we're all dealing with things all the time, negotiating relationships, and also thinking about our sexuality and how we identify in public. And that's been very powerful. I'm gonna stop because I'm pretty sure that I've used my time. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Olin. I guess I'll pop in now. So, hi, everybody. Again, my name is Matthew, and my pronouns are they and he. And to kind of start my story, to tell kind of like my coming out, I have to say that For me, and I'm just gonna say this is me specifically, like there were some telltale signs when I was 3 years old. When I was 3 years old, I was walking around in my mama's heels, had her purse, and one of my aunts, her favorite story that she would always tell to embarrass me was how my sister would either have like some candy or something, and she would start to bother me to try and take the purse away. And I would always threaten her, "Don't make me hit you with my purse." And I would swing it at her. And it was one of those things that always just brought me joy, especially as an adult, knowing I knew who I was even then, but I've always fought against that, if that makes sense. Growing up, I'm the youngest of 7 children. Um, Part of my siblings I did not grow up with, but I grew up with a very um, large family filled with cousins and whatnot. And being in a family where I would say 90% of them are heterosexual, I always felt different. And so I hid and read books and did all of these other things. And around 13, a fairy godmother came into my life. There was this statuesque tall, ebony, like if I can say all of the melanated words, there was this beautiful black trans woman who saw me and really saw me. She was like the cousin of a neighbor, and she just had real questions and conversations with me. Like I let her know like the feelings that I was starting to have as I hit puberty, and she was like, "Child, I see you." And she would just tell me that I was beautiful and just really engaged with me in a way that let me know that sometimes adults can see me and really see me and just want to guide and help me feel comfortable and feel welcome. Um, from there, life does happen, and I do want to share that I did almost lose my life. Um, as some folks go through at a young age. I did contemplate suicide, um, but I did get help, and I did share like the feelings that were on my heart that were feeling heavy at the time, and I still didn't tell my mother. I still hadn't come out. I still didn't really share what was on my heart. It wasn't until I was 16 I wrote her a letter and I said, "Mom, I love you, but I also like boys." And she just looked at me and was like, "Child, get over here." She was like, she was like, "If you don't just, be yourself, love yourself, I love you no matter what." And I know that's not the story for every person. I know that's not the story. But for her to be able to accept me in that moment took this weight off my shoulders that I had been carrying. Um, the second part of that, which I do want to talk about again, about owning myself and knowing these parts of myself. Um, Growing up, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I didn't know where I was going to end up. And being a queer person, being a black queer person, all of the levels that are there, like I was afraid to do certain things. And the thing that was the motivator, the thing that really helped me own myself was, I'm just gonna point this out. I don't know if y'all see, but to my left, I have this altar right here. So as a youth, I actually um, started practicing paganism, and that was a way that helped me like really learn to love myself. And from there, I wanted to go into ministry, but I didn't think that as a pagan that I could be a minister. And I found Unitarian Universalism, a place that was so welcoming and loving and honoring. And being a part of this faith community has let me know that, it's okay to own and be all of myself this whole time. The Unitarian Universalist faith was one of the first faiths to marry same-sex couples. This faith has been something that we are working through, working on, and living with. You know, it is something that is emerging and ever growing, and it accepts me as I am in my full gender dynamic being. Like one of the biggest things, and then before I wrap up, when I talk about owning myself. So Gabrielle, like you, be fully accepting myself as a gender dynamic being is fairly recent. You know, I thought that being male presenting was the thing that I was supposed to do and who I was supposed to be. You know, in my mid 20s, I was completely androgynous, and I had to cut all my hair off to get a traditional job to fit into what society's like perceptions of me were. And again, owning myself in February of this year, I had this epiphany that this is my life. I only have one life. And if I'm going to be me and live and preach and talk about owning myself, I need to live in 100% of my truth. And so the last thing I just want to say to folks is when it comes to owning yourself, sometimes coming out doesn't mean you have to come out to your whole community. Sometimes it's about coming out to yourself first, knowing that you love yourself as you are and owning that this is you. And I'm going to say it. If nobody else says it to you, I love you. So thanks for having me here. And I just want to say again, just love, 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 love yourself.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your stories. I had a bunch of questions planned, but you guys actually answered basically all of them. So I'm just gonna end with this one before I pass it off to Stephanie and then Candace. So for anyone who's in a similar position as you've been in the past, anyone who's considering coming out, very briefly, is there any advice that you have for them?
I'll go real
Well,
quick.
I'm
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Matthew. You first.
I was just going to say again, be patient with yourself. Like there is no rush. You don't have to be 16, you don't have to be 10, you don't have to be 12 to come out. Coming out at whatever point is up to you. You don't owe your coming out story to anybody. And again, just love yourself. Love on yourself. Take yourself out on dates. Like just really know that self-love is the most important.
Gabrielle,
Yes.
I have a question here. It says, what words of encouragement would you like to share with individuals who may be struggling with the decision to come out?
I mean, everything that Matthew said was like right on point.
Mm.
I just think that it's important to just be with yourself and just be open to the people around you and try not to come up with a label for everything as well. Like I said, I think that we have all these categories for people and all these ways that we're divided, um, by aspects of our identity. And as I said, if I just let myself sort of find myself being attracted to or really loving someone, regardless of that person's gender, um, that was a blessing for me, and it's kind of taken me um, on so many levels into other kinds of things, like really especially family like friendships or friendships with people who I'm so different from. But I think it's a process. Like I said, I didn't, just because I kind of found what was right in my first relationship, I still didn't feel like I know for sure. And of course, it was a different time than it is now, although having been involved with some people who come from different family systems or cultural backgrounds that are sometimes more homophobic, or there's a lot more pressure to at least not come out. Um, I can sort of see from my time, I did lose my mom. My mom never asked me about my partners, never met my partners. I wasn't welcome to bring my partners to any family things, and it separated me from my family for quite a while. But I was very strong in myself by the time I did that. I was really, I felt like, yeah, I really know myself, and I know that this matters more to me than whatever the consequences may be of my coming out to my mom. I wish it didn't have to go like that, but I have no regrets about it. And, so I would just say just to sit with it, and also just to not feel so forced to sort of come up with a final, I'm this or I'm that. You don't know. I've been involved with women who, whatever. There's a great line in Torch Song Trilogy where they're at the graveyard burying the father, and the mother, says and this grave is for you, one of the sons, and your wife, and this is for you, Arnold. He's her gay son, and your wife. And Arnold's like, Mom, there's not going to be a wife. And she says, God doesn't know, my son knows. Well, we're never anything fixed until we die. I just kind of believe that's the process of living. So I just say to be open with that and just relax in it.
Okay.
Thank you both so much for your advice and words of encouragement. I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie now, who's going to speak briefly about Rainbow Youth Alliance. And then after Stephanie, Candace will lead the second person.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I started Rainbow Youth Alliance. Actually, this past March was our 15th anniversary of offering twice monthly free support group, community support group meetings for LGBTQ teens in Montgomery County. And, we call it adult facilitated peer-to-peer support. So the teens are there for each other with adults in the room to sort of guide the conversation and keep everything on track. So it's free. You don't need to register, just show up. We're actually having virtual meetings now, and they're going to put up the link for the coordinator who, if you know somebody, or if you want to attend one of the meetings as a teen, you can contact our coordinator, and they will send you the link for the next meeting. It's every first and third Sunday in the afternoon, and you just need to show up. And as far as coming out, it's a whole different thing. Well, not a whole different thing, but it's quite a different thing to be a teen coming out than to be an adult, because it's so much more risky for a teen. So we recommend for teens, if they ask, and as I said, the teens are there for each other. They share each other's stories. They give each other support, which is a really wonderful thing to see. But the first thing to think about when coming out as a teen is safety. How you may not even know how your parents are going to react to you. And so it might be good to sort of practice with somebody that is supportive, a cousin, an aunt, or a trusted adult, and just try a little role playing and see what answers you have for their questions. And as horrible as it is, a teen may have to stay in the closet to not be kicked out of their home and end up on the street, which is a very common occurrence in this country still. So, coming out is a fraught thing. And, we just say, get support wherever you can. Friends, school counselors, Gay Straight Alliance at your school, and Rainbow Youth Alliance, and, or your congregation. I'm a member of Matthew's congregation, Yay Unitarians. And it's a very affirming place. Even if you don't come to Rainbow Youth Alliance, you'll feel very welcome. And there are no scary symbols of crosses or dead men on being nailed to something. And so it's a very welcoming and safe place to come. And Rainbow Youth Alliance, as I said, is for anybody. We welcome allies. Allies have been some of our staunchest members and brought in other members of the community who are afraid to come. And it can be a little scary to walk into something that is a church if you've been abused by religion before, which is not an uncommon occurrence for people in the community. So anyway, thank you for letting me speak. I enjoyed everything that both you and Ellen and Matthew said. It was right on, and I think this is a wonderful pride. And thank you, Janet, for putting it on.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, everybody else who spoke. That was just so moving. I'm just really touched by all of it. I'm Candace Hagan, and I'm going to segue from the coming out portion to some other topics. But first, I want to say that I have a very good coming out as you handout that people can look in the chat and get my email and ask me for it. It outlines some of the things Stephanie was talking about. On the one hand, for teens, especially for kids of any age, we think safety comes first. Most parents, when they study it, will be supportive, but there's a minority of parents who can be really terrible, even violent, even abusive, and sometimes kids don't know what to expect or they get surprised, like somebody mentioned. And so we really recommend getting adult support, making a plan for safety, and testing the waters. Start talking about LGBTQ topics around your parents and see how they react. Get a sense of the temperature. You don't want to put yourself at risk. And I'll just say that in Montgomery County, every year, MCPS has students who get dropped off in a parking lot, the locks are changed, the college money is taken away. Terrible things can happen. It's a very minority group of students, but it's horrible consequences. So we want people to stay safe. On the other hand, now I'm going to shift to my topic, which is PFLAG and parent support. There's a lot to be gained from coming out to your parents if they can be supportive or learn to be supportive. So you don't want to never come out if you could get that support. It can be wonderful. And so Trusted Adults, Genders and Sexualities Alliance, GSA clubs at schools, Rainbow Youth Alliance, there's lots of options, lots and lots of resources. And again, I have lots of resources I can send people by email. Okay, so I'm going to swing into my portion. And unlike these other really elegant people, I'm going to read mine because I couldn't remember it all. All right, so my name is Candace Haga, and my pronouns are she, her. I am cisgender, which means not transgender, and straight, another word for heterosexual, as is my husband. We feel blessed to have 2 rainbow kids who are now adults. They allow me to speak about our experiences for events like this. I've been involved with PFLAG support groups and advocacy in Montgomery County for 14 years now. PFLAG is a national and local organization of allies for rainbow folks. Technically, it is parents, friends, family of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer folks. I'll say more on PFLAG later. Our younger daughter is cisgender. She came out to us as lesbian in 8th grade. She would also say gay or queer. I joined PFLAG to learn how to be a strong ally. She got good support from her high school GSA club, that stands now more inclusively for Genders and Sexualities Alliance clubs, and from Stephanie's Rainbow Youth Alliance, RYA in Rockville. That was 14 years ago. Our older kid came out to us at the end of college as transgender. We had raised that child for 21 years as a boy and son by mistake. We didn't know any better, and she didn't have words for it at the time. Just making sure I wasn't muting myself. Okay, great. She's actually a transgender woman. She also identifies as queer. I got support from PFLAG T families and from an online group for parents of trans kids, of which I'm now on the moderating team. She got affirming support from a gender therapist. That was 9 years ago. So we have a cisgender lesbian daughter and a transgender queer daughter. They're both doing well. We love them dearly, and we're very proud of them. I was supportive when each of our kids came out to us, but I also had a lot to learn, such as that every human being has a gender identity and a sexual orientation, and there are many varieties of each, including none. All are just various normal ways of being human, not any pathology, just variety. However, a lack of family support is devastating for LGBTQ youth, and it puts them at much higher risk for many terrible outcomes, such as suicide, homelessness, addictions, and more. The good news is that research shows strong family support helps lower all those risks for LGBTQ youth. As a PFLAG mom, I now try to help other parents learn to become strong allies. Parents can experience a wide range of reactions when their rainbow kid comes out to them, including confusion and worry. Talking with other PFLAG parents enabled me to be a better ally to my 2 rainbow kids. We parents need our own support to be helpful to our LGBTQ kids. The most important thing I learned was that I had to support my rainbow kids immediately and not make them wait until I understood all of it. Lack of family support is devastating for LGBTQ kids and puts them at risk. Strong family support makes a huge difference in their safety and well-being. While it's important to learn about LGBTQ issues, we don't have to understand everything in order to love our precious rainbow kids unconditionally, period. So there are many rainbow resources for families, and I collect them for all kinds of intersectional issues, such as autism spectrum, faith, race, military families, you name it. I just have a huge collection of them, and I'm always happy to share them with people. I'm just going to lift up a few that I've spoken about. PFLAG, there's a national PFLAG site that has lots of resources, and it even can be translated into 102 languages, the whole website with a tool at the top. We here in Rockville and Montgomery County are in Metro DC PFLAG chapter. So that has its own website and resources. What I want people to know is that in this pandemic, there are only 2 PFLAG support groups in Montgomery County, and they're on Zoom, and the website's not updated. So you need to email me, and I will connect you with that. The PFLAG support groups are wonderful. They're free. They're confidential. So let me know if you need that. I want to make a shout out to the concept of gender therapists. These are therapists who do rainbow affirming therapy. So gender identity and sexual orientation themselves are not disorders needing any kind of treatment or change. But there are specialized gender therapists who can support LGBTQ youth and their parents in their journeys. So again, you can email me. I have a resource list in Montgomery County. As might have been mentioned before, please, please avoid anything called conversion or reparative therapy. It's not therapy at all. These are methods to try to change someone's gender identity or sexual orientation, but they are harmful, they are dangerous, and they don't work. Plus, they are illegal in Maryland, D.C., Virginia, and 17 other U.S. states for minors. Last but not least, in my portion, I'm going to lift up a wonderful group called Trans Maryland. And again, I have a resource sheet with 12 resources, and my email's in the chat. I can send you a copy easily. But Trans Maryland is by and for trans folks to promote wellness and develop young trans leadership. They have virtual support groups for ages 18 on up. They have lots of resources and programs on their website, including, I just found out, a name and gender marker change program for those who are 18 years old and older. That's very helpful. So check them out. Okay. I am going to now turn this over to Connor Hagel from Smile. Thank you, Connor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Candace. Yes, as Candace mentioned, I am from Smile, which is supporting and mentoring youth advocates and leaders based out of Washington, D.C. However, my job title is LGBTQ Resource Navigator. I work specifically in Montgomery County under a program called MoCo Reconnect, which is an education and employment initiative for youth 16 to 24. And I provide case management and specialized services to youth in that program that identify as LGBTQ. Personally, I identify as queer and trans. Prior to my work with Smile, I spent over 8 years in New York City working with homeless LGBTQ youth. So I, been doing this kind of stuff for a while. And so as far as resources go, here in Montgomery County, there is not currently a dedicated youth serving homeless system. I am part of the county work group who is designing that program. And while we are working on all of that, we are also working on making the existing homeless services more accessible for a youth. Generally, homeless services are youth are identified as youth under 25 years old. And so if they are under 25, we're working to make that navigation process easier and ensure their safety and well-being as they go through that process. I also provide service to LGBTQ youth who might need help with name changes, getting connected with, either reconnected with if they want to go back to their public school, or if they want to find a GED program, I can help with that. I can help obtaining benefits like food stamps, Medicaid, and just sort of any other, if they need sensitive medical or mental health care, I can help them locate that and resources to pay for it. And then Smile in general, due to the pandemic, currently our groups are all online. So we have a lot of different support groups that are available to youth across the country. They include things, we have like targeted groups for folks who identify as trans, folks who identify as people of color. We have general chat groups. We have a program called Little Smiles, which is actually for LGBTQ youth who are 6 through 12, because most of our programs are for youth 13 through 24. And then we also do some specialization where, 13 to 24 is a really big age gap. So we will have events and activities for 18 to 24-year-olds specifically. And we are in the process of, working on going back to in-person programs. So you can keep an eye on smyal.org for hopefully sometime this summer or early fall that we will be able to start doing in-person events again. I also do Montgomery County youth specific events, and that information can be found at mocoreconnect.org or smile.com/reconnect. And I can put some of these things in my contact information into the chat. I don't want to, I know we're running a little bit late, so I think I'm going to wrap that up. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. But I want to make sure that everybody gets to speak today.
Okay, thank you so much, Connor. We're going to do questions, I think, at the end once everybody's spoken, but those are just terrific resources. And I want to add that I've got Smile on my resource sheet. They're terrific. They do terrific stuff in Montgomery County and DC. I want to lift up that in the homeless youth population in general, I believe the figure is 40% are LGBTQ kids. This is outrageous. This is unacceptable. This is appalling. And it goes back to what I was saying about the need to help families and parents be supportive. There's nothing about being LGBTQ that makes you homeless. It's family rejection and abuse and violence and unsafe situations that make kids either run away from home or they get kicked out of the home. So the work that Smile and Connor is doing is so important, and our county desperately needs more LGBTQ youth services. Okay, that's my plug. Now we're going to go to, next on the list is Alexis Blackman of Casa Ruby. Alexis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, so my name is Alexis Blackman, and I am the Director of Government and Public Affairs with Casa Ruby. We are a social service organization geared towards the LGBTQ population within the District of Columbia, but we have recently branched out to do some international work as well. Currently, the services that we offer, we have a low barrier shelter that is currently housed at 2002 R Street, Washington, D.C., Northwest. But our main location is 7530 Georgia Avenue, and we're doing work to get back to that large location. But we have a low barrier shelter. We have a transitional housing program, as well as an emergency housing program. Our programs typically work for the age range of 18 through 24. But this year we have did a lot of work with the LGBT Coalition, and speaking with the coalition, and the mayor has put more money into the budget for 2022 for the services to be expanded to 25 and up. We offer, as well as our housing services, we do also do immigration services to help people who are coming to file for political asylum, because being LGBTQ in a lot of other countries are extremely dangerous to where the point they're killing people. So we help with that. We help with all types of legal issues where they help with name changes and stuff as well. We have a mental health department that we have opened up that offers therapy sessions, as well as all types of mental health outreach support to all of our clients or people who are seeking the support. We have opened a Casa Ruby pharmacy, which right now is working on PrEP and PEP, as well as pretty soon we'll be able to supply the clients who are HIV positive with their medicine as well. We have a treatment and adherence program, which teaches the clients the importance of treatment of adhering to the medication. We have a non-medical case management program where we do a ton of referrals for housing assistance, like if you're already in a place and you need rental assistance, linking people with other cares, other doctors, or plastic surgeons, all types of things happen in our non-case management. We also have a domestic violence division, which works with people who have experienced violence in their home and they have to get out and try to find somewhere else to live that's a more safer environment. We have a few locations. We have a Southeast campus. We also have a DuPont Circle campus, and then we have our large location at Georgia Avenue. Our website is casaruby.org, and I'm not near the chat box, but Ms. Janet, if you put my email in the chat, I am reachable by email for anyone who needs any type of services.
I sure will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. That was fabulous. Casa Ruby, I just can't say enough good about that organization, and they have taken a lot of the burden of Montgomery County homeless youth problems, and that's one reason we got to keep working in Montgomery County to do more with ours, but they are a fantastic organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, we did put that in the chat, your information, so they can get a hold of you. Thank you. Let's see, next. Yeah, this would be Khalif Moores teaches English at Montgomery College, Tacoma Park, and he's going to speak about LGBTQ and health issues. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief. And so I will say that besides my honor to be a part-time adjunct professor at Montgomery College, I spent 5 years at the DC Department of Health doing community engagement around HIV and STIs. And I just left to join New Jersey as the director of HIV services. And so I have health department experience, and I wanted to just offer a few affirmations and considerations in regards to health and well-being. First off, I want anyone who's listening to understand that you matter. You are valued, you are valuable, your life matters. All lives matter, Black lives matter, trans lives matter, but you also need to ensure that you believe that you matter and do self-care. So I encourage you to ensure that you have the resources that you need for self-care, and in tying that self-advocacy, your voice matters, use it. You need to find the services and the providers that work best for you, that respect you, and that give you a comprehensive understanding of what's going on. I encourage you to, especially in this pandemic, social support has been so key in my survival during this pandemic. COVID-19 is real. We're almost out of the woods, but we're not out of the woods yet. So having a social support system that you trust, that you love, that affirms and builds you up is crucial, not just during COVID, but for life. I've got friends, I'm 40 years old. I've got friends from when I was 6 still in my circle. And having that social support system is really, really crucial, especially for LGBTQ plus TIA folks. Some other things to ponder is school supports. A lot of programs offer SGAs. Montgomery College is an amazing Safe Zones Ally program where you have advocates that are staff that are specifically trained to be allies to the LGBT community, that are safe spaces where they can come and have conversations and get resources. And so whenever you decide to go to Montgomery College, check them out. It's a really great program. The school health centers are an excellent source to look into for some school support. And part of using your voice is to also report when things are not appropriate and disrespectful, and saying this is not appropriate, because customer service is the foundation of what we do as health providers. If the customer service is not correct, you need to say something. And no matter what your orientation or gender identity or expression is, you are a customer and you matter. Some other pieces are looking at sexual well-being, that be informed, be aware, and be able to provide consent in terms of your sexual well-being and your health. Get information about, STI, STD screenings and HIV screenings. There's some great resources that I will put in the chat box as well about some of the programs available at Montgomery County. Some of my favorites are the Dennis Avenue Health Center, which is in Silver Spring. Montgomery Cares has a network of 10 independent nonprofit clinics and a bunch of other locations that do primary health care to low-income, uninsured adults in Montgomery County. And they have a principle of diversity, inclusion, and respect. And there's a program for free at-home HIV testing. And there's also a program for STI services to end the HIV epidemic. And I will put those links in the chat box. But as a 17-year health professional, I really encourage you to realize that your life matters and to really take ownership of that, take agency for yourselves, and know that pride is every day that we're alive. It is an act of revolution. And so happy pride, happy life, and be encouraged and know that you matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalif. That was wonderful. You covered a lot of ground, and health care is so important, and affirming health care is so important. And my trans daughter particularly has learned that she just doesn't put up with people who don't respect her. She finds somebody else, and she's willing to teach them, but she's not willing to take any disrespect or nonsense from people. And that's a skill to learn. We could all learn that. So there's a lot of stuff popping up in the chat that people can look at for resources. Last but certainly not least, we have from MoCo Pride, a recent high school graduate as of yesterday, Lou Wetterin. Hi, Lou. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. So as you heard, my name's Lou Wetter, and I use they, them pronouns, and I am the now former president of MoCo Pride, considering I just graduated out of high school. But I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit. We're a student-run, student-led, for-student organization for Montgomery County called MoCo Pride, and we're here to offer LGBT students and curious allies a place for education. We have monthly meetings where we talk about a topic and we try to go in depth into that topic and learn about things. A recent example is we did LGBT and the law, where we discussed what rights you have as an LGBT student within the state of Maryland. We also want to provide advocacy opportunities by networking with other established organizations. I worked with Jeremy Lemaster from Free State Justice, so I could give testimony on the Inclusive Schools Act, which is a bill that sadly did not pass this session, but we're looking into what modifications need to be done to get it passed through the floor. And that was just a bill that would make any school that received any money from the state they need to put in their written guidelines that they cannot discriminate against students based on many factors, one of which was LGBT status and identity. We also want to, as Mr. Morse was saying, we want to provide that kind of social safety, that social net, where we just try to talk to each other, we just hang out with each other and play games together so that we can build a sense of community, which we feel has been very necessary for COVID. During COVID, we wanted to support each other during this very difficult time, especially because we have members who are in non-affirming households, and we will we will be the affirming household. We will replace that need. It is a place welcome for everyone, provided you're a student in Montgomery County, and we're very excited to have you. If you're interested in joining, we are on Instagram at MoCo Pride, all lowercase, and you can email us at mcountypride. One last thing, we also try to have overarching projects. The really exciting thing is this year, our project was creating the LGBT studies course, which will be offered by schools this fall. Yeah, it was so exciting. That was a massive project. We had some students on that panel. It was amazing because teachers were asking us, the LGBT students, what we wanted from this course, and our members were able to give feedback and what we wanted to see. And unfortunately, it is too late to request it now, but if it is not in your school's course guideline, and it is a one-semester course, I believe, so you can message your school and see if you can get it in during the spring. So just contact a social studies teacher who would be willing to teach it, and go for it.
Oh, Lou, that's great. That's so encouraging to hear. I have to say that in that pilot project for the LGBTQ history course, schools were fighting to get in to be in the pilot program. Usually they have to beg schools to pilot things because it's kind of a pain in the neck, but students are so excited. They're asking for this course in middle school and elementary school, and I don't see why not. So thank you for that. And I also want to lift up something I say when I talk to the GSA clubs in the schools or anybody who will listen, that when we say LGBTQ youth and allies, people need to remember that there are people of various sexual orientations, various gender identities. They don't all understand each other, and there are students who come to those groups or other kinds of groups that have LGBTQ family members. You know, they don't want to hear negative things about their sisters, their brothers, their cousins, their parents. We have rainbow people as parents in the school system, and we have rainbow staff. So that's my latest thing, is trying to push for support for rainbow staff in MCPS, because there's support like that in the public library system, but there isn't in MCPS. So that's something to think about. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, and I guess maybe we'll do a question and answer. You're muted, Ellen.
Thank you. All right, you can hear me now. Should we do some question and answer before I just make a few final comments? Do we have any questions? I'm not seeing anything up there. I'm looking in the chat. That's been a lot of sources that you've put up. All right. I see a question though. I think you've answered that. What type of support do organizations currently need from the community? Donations, volunteers, both or other? Does anyone want to respond to that?
Well, I have a very, very select pool because MoCo Pride, again, is an organization for the students, but we live and die by our community. You know, I think that is true for all of us, that we would like interested members to come to our meetings and tell us what they want to learn about and tell us what they want to be involved in. Like, I am contacting Jeremy Lemaster. There are many, many, many bills that could use an LGBT student voice. Let us know what you're interested in. Let us know where you want to testify. That kind of feedback and that kind of engagement is what, at least I know for student organizations like what I'm representing, that is the bread and butter. That is our lifeblood. That is whether or not we're going to be able to give back to our community in the way we really want to.
Any other group? Ways that you could appreciate volunteers, donations?
I'll just say, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, most any group will have something on their page about what they need as far as donations and stuff like that. I urge folks to look at smaller organizations, local mutual aid groups, things like that, and find out what they need. And then also just voices. When there are issues that come up, you know, regarding LGBTQ housing, regarding LGBTQ rights in schools and stuff like that. Montgomery County likes to tout itself as a very progressive community, but it can also be a very quiet community. And so it's not just LGBTQ identified folks and parents of LGBTQ identified folks. We need to hear from the larger community that you do in fact support these, because the voices of people who don't support these things and who want to take these rights that have been so hard fought away are very loud, and we can't do it by ourselves. So keep an eye out in the news, you know, keep an eye out on social media feeds of various organizations, and just find out what's going on. And if you have to write your council member, if you have to write your state representative or call them, I think that's one of the biggest things to make sure that we don't take a big step back.
I think that's exactly right. And I just added in the chat that a wonderful person called Mark Eckstein is the LGBTQ chair for MCC-PTA, the whole county PTA group of MCPS. And he and a lot of volunteers are doing wonderful work, not only to support the GSA clubs and the sponsors, but just to keep an eye on all kinds of issues in the schools and to talk to administration and they can always use voices. You don't have to have a rainbow kid to help them out. And you know, they keep an eye on legislation, as Connor said, for things that affect teens, and Trans Maryland, the health group I mentioned, does as well. And for example, they got through a bill that allows the driver's licenses to have a gender neutral marker. That's a huge thing for teens coming out, and to have a piece of ID that does that is huge. You can't even imagine. And another thing you can do is just give talks, talk to people in your faith community, in your neighborhood. I'm finding at my church, people were getting hung up, not naming any names, but people were getting hung up on they, them pronouns. What's that? And I did a talk explaining why is that important and why is it so disrespectful to ignore people's pronouns? What kind of message are you saying? And it's all about safety and respect for other people. This is not rocket science, you know, and just conveying, like, me and my family, we're not from Mars, you know, we're just humans. So I am in the privileged position of being able to come out and give talks like this, and not everybody is. I understand that. But to the extent you're able to, people need to hear that LGBTQ people and their loved ones exist, and we care about each other. And, you know, we go to the grocery store and do just normal stuff, you know, and that's another way of activism, of just bringing it up and mentioning it if you're able, you know, if you're safe and you're able. Do it for somebody else who's not safe and able. Yeah, there's my 2 cents. Okay, Ellen, take it away.
Now you can hear me, yes? Yeah. So many people have talked about the importance of self-respect and self-care. And we've also talked about the idea that we shouldn't accept anything less than respect from others around us. And I think that things have been changing, you know, but there are still, of course, people, and particularly politicians, who are extraordinarily homophobic. It's nice for us to set some standards, but just as we're in process, figuring things out for ourselves, we have to grant that, you know, people who are straight and perhaps, you know, have not had much exposure to LGBTQ issues, you know, might need a little bit of time to learn some things, but finding that line of where you're exhausted because you're constantly having to educate people. There are so many good resources now that people can share. So to put that back. But I think that, you know, one of the major things for us, again, in our process is that some of us may have participated in counseling before. And I know for myself, when I adopted each of my sons, they had to participate in counseling. And as a family, we had to. And one of the core things that I learned, and it's really changed things a lot for me, is that I can't change other people, but I can't control them either, but I can change or control my reaction to them. And I think that once people are figuring out, you know that I'm queer, I'm trans, whatever, I think the next thing is sort of just to establish to what extent you want to be trying to educate people, or having those resources ready and just sending them to people at the same time that you're coming out. And to recognize that if you can think about how perhaps it's scary for you to come out, it's not scary for others to hear you tell something about yourself. Some people knew. There were people who were like, yeah, I'm glad you finally figured it out. But there are other people who were just oblivious, and it was like, wow, bam. And it can be a little bit awkward. So we can contribute to the success of that in some ways. I think, the other thing is to try not to, depending on the stakes, let some of the stuff get to us as it has. That's a really important aspect of self-care. And as much as we care about other people to whom we may come out, that's the nature of relationships, that people can push each other's buttons sometimes. And particularly if you're the only person in your family who is the way you are, or you're the only one in your friend group, you sometimes just need to take some space. But at the same time, you need to also say, you need to talk to other people about this. Like, I'm not your therapist. And I can't reiterate enough how important it is, as Candace brought up, that, my colleagues, I treasure very much. They've participated in safe space training, and they have those stickers up visibly on their office doors. And to the extent that, especially, we just normalize all of this by constantly, in all kinds of situations, when we're giving examples or we're using pronouns, that we mix it up. I've always done that in my teaching, and sometimes it catches students off guard, but that's a valuable teaching moment that's not threatening. And the same when I first began teaching, many of my colleagues who are gay or lesbian are sort of afraid to come out to their class. I don't come in like waving a pride flag and like, I'm Ellen and I'm so fabulously queer and I love it for 30 plus years. But on the other hand, I also don't shy away from bringing issues up in my classroom. And so many of my colleagues are afraid and they haven't recognized they got to get new, because young people are in a very different mindset across the board. And over the years, I brought materials that are talking about what the Bible says, for example, about homosexuality. I don't use that term, but that's the term in some of the articles. And I'll bring those into my writing classes. And my colleagues was like, I say, even when the students have a choice, they will choose that. Because the thing is, people are afraid because they don't know and they don't want to make mistakes. So I will always give people the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But I also think that the LGBTQ movement is still got a ways to go in terms of recognizing the range of our identities, right? So just as Gabrielle identified and said she was autistic, we need to really do a better job of being racially and ethnically inclusive, religiously inclusive, and also thinking more about people with a range of abilities or disabilities. And I do remember when I was first coming out, the only group of people we ever saw for LGBTQ anything were affluent white men. And we're seeing in the popular media now a somewhat more diverse representation, but we have a long way to go. So I would say amongst ourselves, I would like us to step up too and show a lot more mutual respect for our entire diversity.
Ellen, I just want to back up. A few things you said really struck me. One is don't feel as an LGBTQ person like you have to do all the educating, send people to resources. That's what my trans kid did, and that's what I learned when she was coming out. She said, Mom, this is my life every day, and it's stressful. I don't have time to hold your hand and educate you and support you. You got to find a PFLAG group. So I did, and I now tell other parents, that sounds kind of sassy, but it was exactly right. And I tell parents, and I just put in the chat, I have a handout for advice for parents of trans kids from parents of trans kids. And the point is, your trans kid coming out is got enough to deal with. Don't make them the person that has to educate you. Maybe they can give you a tip, but you need to get your resources, because there's a million resources out there. It's just like a ball of yarn. You pull a thread and you'll find a ton of resources, and just do that. The other thing you were saying was about teachers, educators, and I cannot tell you how much it meant to my cisgender lesbian daughter to have an English teacher. I don't know what it's about, all y'all English teachers, but the lesbian English teacher who came in and said she got married last weekend in DC meant the world to my kid and so many kids, that someone who's an adult just came out matter-of-factly and was like a role model. It just meant so much. So I understand people feel nervous, but I just, on the other side, would weigh that it really, kids need to see more role models. They really do. So thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say really that in every kind of context, like if I mean, I can't even think like of all the different places I could be outside of, in my work as an educator, just kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt that if you just bring things out there, that you're not forcing people to come and respond to you, but just they're hearing it and they have time to process. And it's really shocking to me that people have a great misperception of how many of us there are in the world, right? Because, it's a very small number of us who make ourselves kind of visible or actively come out. And I am blessed to have lots of privileges. And I would like to see a lot more educators who also are in this community where they have all of these protections recognize they're in a position of power, and the young people are not. And so they don't have the same kind of risk to face to try to do that. Yeah.
I also wanted to say to especially young people that grown-ups or anybody's response to you coming out, their first response is not necessarily their last response. And that's kind of what Ellen's getting at. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Stay safe. But for example, we had some very conservative friends that we just assumed by their religion would be very negative when our trans daughter came out. And I can hardly tell you without crying, they sent their teenage son over with a basket of blueberry homemade muffins and a letter that said, "We don't care, we love your kids, thank you for telling us." And I see in the chat Stephanie said, thank people when they come out. You know, that's a personal, delicate piece of information, and just thank them for trusting you. But don't assume by age that's the grandma, the grandpa, the religious neighbor, the whatever, yeah, I had another neighbor down, well, in a different community who was a gay man himself, and he asked me if my daughter had a boyfriend, and I said, wow, funny thing, she's lesbian. So we are straight people, we are cis people, we are some of both, and there are LGBT people. You know, it's a huge rainbow, and I've encountered in the school system cisgender gay or lesbian or bisexual educators who don't understand transgender people, and vice versa. So everybody can be an ally to everybody. That's corny, but that's how I feel.
If I just wanted to kind of add one thing, especially as adults who might be interacting with youth. As was mentioned earlier, you know, it is your job to educate yourself, but think of that kind of as eye-opening and an idea of where to start, because not all LGBTQ plus folks identify the same way. And just because you read a guide about LGBTQ folks doesn't mean that that is exactly the, you know, the ideas of the person that you're going to be speaking with. So read different resources. You know, youth versus adult resource guides are often dramatically different. You know, the word queer amongst youth versus amongst older LGBTQ folks, or LGBT folks, because they don't necessarily like the Q. You know, that's like a, you know, a very big gap as far as like word meaning. And one of the other things is, especially if you're an adult dealing with a young person or you're in any type of position of power, make sure that when someone comes out to you, or you find out someone is LGBTQ identified, that you let them know it's okay to correct you. Because, you know, if you get the wrong, you know, if you get the wrong pronouns or something like that, it's hard to, you know, correct that. It's hard to speak, you know, it's hard enough to come out, but then to be like, having to correct someone is just another issue. And if somebody does correct you, you know, be gracious about it and be appreciative about it, because that's all part of the learning process. You don't actually know that person's identity better than they do, even if they're 8 years old. So
That's a great point, Connor, and I'll share with you that my kids have educated me. If someone comes out to you about being LGBTQ, whatever identity or pronouns or anything, and you mess up, just apologize briefly and don't make it all about I'm so sorry and I'm so upset and I suck and I'm whatever. I don't know if you're supposed to say that, but just briefly say I'm sorry and I'll try harder and then do it. And I have a tip for loved ones, which is practice, practice, practice. Somebody you know changes their name, their pronouns. You need to go in front of the mirror. You need to do it in the shower. You need to do it in the car. You need to write it on a piece of paper. You need to retrain your brain and do the work and not just keep saying, oh, this is so hard for me. And let me tell you, I screwed up a million times and wasn't very good at it, but you need to be, because you need to respect people's names and pronouns. If somebody changes a name for any reason, you don't just keep using their old name. You learn it. Yeah. I'm going to shut up now.
Khalif, Gabrielle, Lou, anything you want to add before we close it here?
I think you guys have said so many incredible things that I'm very happy to hear as a student who has come out to my teachers many, many, many times. And I appreciate you're all very open about the importance of being willing to learn, especially when interacting with the new generation. And I believe this is already mentioned, but I guess I'll just say it again, is one thing that I've encountered a lot is you're going to learn because, someone came out to me as a he, him lesbian, and I had absolutely no clue what that meant, but it was not my job I didn't need to understand what they meant to respect their pronouns and then respect their identity. I think we often believe that we need to understand something fully before we're able to respect it. And it's not hard to just simply say, I don't understand, but I understand what pronouns you want me to call you. And I understand, if you bring a partner home that identifies this way. And that's all that I really need so that I can show my love for you.
I don't really have much to say because I've really just enjoyed hearing all of the different voices and perspectives throughout this last hour and a half. I think it's really cool that we have such a range of different ages, different identities, even different locations here. So yeah, I'm just really thankful to be able to be a part of this today, and to hear from all of you.
Thanks. Khalif,
A great-
anything?
This was a great event. Although coming out can be amazing, don't feel pressured to come out if you don't feel like it. You have to be comfortable and decide within yourself. I never came out. I didn't believe in coming out. I'm just like, I'm who I am, and if you want to know, you'll find out or you'll ask. I'm not gonna just do it because the straights don't do it. But build your own legacy, build your own story, and do what's comfortable for you. But you have to ensure, please, I encourage you to be doing what's comfortable for you. And you're
Well,
loved.
yeah. Thank you, everyone. It's really nice to be doing something together like this for Pride. And I hope that when people are watching this, they take full advantage of the personal and community resources that are available to you. Thanks. I think we're wrapping it up here. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
The City of Rockville would like to thank all the panelists for participating in this important discussion. If you find yourself needing help on how or when to come out to your family and friends, know that you are not alone. And support is available to help you with your coming out journey. And the City of Rockville offers free counseling services for children, youth, and families. To learn more about how to schedule free counseling, contact Rockville's Community Services Division by phone at 240-314-8306 or online at rockvillemd.gov/communityservices/youth. On behalf of the Rockville Human Rights Commission and the City of Rockville, I'm Kathy Dantzler. Thanks for watching.